This is an archival video showing the CDC weekly pneumonia and influenza deaths uh, website and associated pages on April 15th, 2020, about 2:26 in the morning a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is shortly after I posted my uncounted COVID deaths, the CDC's contradictory pneumonia and influenza death numbers. Okay, this is an article presentation video all together on some pretty remarkable things about their numbers. So first, I'm going to show the NCHS, that's the National Center for Health Statistics data file. So I'm going to click on that, and we go to the CDC, and we get their. Actually, I'm going to save this just to be careful here. Okay. So this is NCHS data 14.csv. It's the latest file on their website showing the pneumonia and influenza deaths from late 2013 up until the 13th week of 2020, ending, according to their website, on March 28th. So here we go. It's downloading it. Okay, so let's open the folder. Here it is. I'm going to double click. It's a comma-separated file, so it's just text separated by commas. It can be read by a spreadsheet program like LibreOffice Calc or Microsoft Excel, or anything. Pretty much any good spreadsheet can read it, as well as you can look at it with a Word editor. You can import it into programs like Python, MATLAB, etc., etc. Okay, so here we are. Here's the file. It has the year. It has the week. It has the percent of deaths due to pneumonia and influenza. It has the expected percent of deaths due to their model. It has a threshold, which is when they declare that they have a flu epidemic, which, considering that the vast majority of these deaths are pneumonia, is a little bit surprising. And they have all deaths. So this appears to be, from their description, the total number of deaths in that week from all causes. So cancer, heart attacks, strokes, accidents, all of that. Then they have pneumonia deaths, which is quite large, and in almost all weeks is larger than 3,000. There are few where it's in the 2,000s. And influenza deaths, which is much smaller for each week. I'm now going to kind of give you a tour through this and show the basics of it. So let's go here, and we're going to do this. So the reason we do this is so I can see the headers as I scroll down. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is sum the pneumonia and influenza deaths for each week. That's here. So I'm going to do equal sum, and we want to do G2 and H2 here. We get a value there. Okay, so that's for that week. The sum of these two is 3143. And we grab this little thingy here, and we go down fast to the end. Okay, there we are. And now it does it for every week. It's made the sum, and we're going to call this P and I deaths. Okay, so that's just so we have a header. We can easily see what's going on here. And now we're going to select here, and I'm going to do control click to extend the selection out to here, out to here. And then I'm going to do format, number format, 1000 separator. Okay, that makes it easier to read and see what's going on. For the most part here, I'm just going to look at these death numbers, not this percent here. Keep in mind, this is the year and this is the week. So it's supposed to be weekly data, and it is described as data from death certificates. So this arguably is a count of death certificates that they received for that week. So the deaths are listed in the week in which the death was given, not when they received it. At least that's what they seem to say. As you'll see, there's some reasons to be kind of skeptical of this data. So we'll get there. Okay, so let's go down and I'm just going to kind of scroll through and show what the typical data is, what the file looked like. So you can see the file as it appeared to be on April 15th. And let's get to 2018. Now, I'm especially interested in the first 13 weeks of the year because we've just gone through the first 13 weeks, our list for 2020. So actually, anyway, I want to compare those. So I'm going to go down to, there are 12, 13. And just so it's clear what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and copy it the slow way here instead of using the hotkey. And let's go down to 2020. So this file contains the data for the first 13 weeks ending March 28th of 2020. So now I'm going to actually let me just do it again so it's more clear what I'm doing. Instead of using the hotkey, we'll do this. Okay, so now these are the numbers from last year, 2019. Okay. And what you can see very easily from these columns is the total sum for the first week of this year is less than last year. Same thing for week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8, week 9, week 10, week 11, week 12, and week 13, which is kind of remarkable given that we're supposed to be having a deadly super disease, COVID-19, coronavirus, spreading through the U.S. during this period. So remember, if you don't have tests, and we didn't for the most part in January and February, it still don't have a lot. We don't have good testing. You would expect these coronavirus deaths to be diagnosed as pneumonia or in some cases influenza. And yet, there's absolutely no evidence of it in this file until the 12th and 13th week. Okay, so here, see, it's declining just like it would in a normal year. And actually, the numbers are less than the preceding year, which was supposedly a normal year. And only here does it start to turn up. Now, this is what we'd expect to see in an epidemic where the disease could be misidentified as pneumonia. And in the absence of tests, you would expect pneumonia to be the main diagnosis and possibly occasionally influenza. Actually, that's not true because influenza often is diagnosed or may be diagnosed without a test for influenza. So at least if you believe the CDC says it's hard to actually test for influenza. So if you believe that, doctors presumably diagnose it without a test. So the point is, again, that if you compare last year's numbers for the comparable weeks, 1 through 13, they are higher than this year, all the way up to week 13. Now, I'll show some more stuff about like how complete these numbers might be. And that's a big issue. Okay, so that's basically the contents of this file. And I'm going to just sort of put it aside for now. And I'm going to go back to the website. And okay, so we got that file. I wanted to show people what that file looked like and what the numbers were on April 15th in case it changes somehow. So this is the weekly pneumonia and influenza page that I refer to that I was looking for data in. And the first thing that you see when you come to this section of it, which is pneumonia and influenza mortality surveillance, and it's based on NCHS mortality surveillance data. And again, it says week ending March 28th, that's week 13. So instead of showing you the absolute numbers, the thousands of deaths, they give you this percent plot, which is, it's important to understand, is the percent of all deaths due to pneumonia and influenza. And that's the scary red line here that shoots up here, for example, and it's shooting up here, and this is probably COVID deaths that are being misclassified, if you will, as pneumonia. Perhaps. Again, as I'll get to, there's reason to have a lot of doubts about the quality of these data and numbers, unfortunately. They should be very good for national security reasons. Okay, so this is where you click to get the NCHS data 14.csv. I already showed that. And some more text. And another one I wanted to take a look at is FluView Interactive, which, since it says flu, you might think has something to do with tracking influenza, which is a class of viruses, which on the CDC website is often treated as flu. Okay, so remember, in common usage, many people use flu as just flu, right? It could be any kind of common cold, anything you might get, particularly in the winter. And in fact, that's the way I used it as a kid until relatively recently. But the CDC usually seems to be referring to influenza, which is an actual category of viruses for which there is a vaccine that the CDC promotes very heavily. Now, pneumonia can be caused by many other viruses, many bacteria, many things other than the influenza virus. And that's one of the issues in interpreting these numbers, and the way the CDC seems to handle them is highly, let's say, pretty strange. We'll get to that, the kicker, in a moment. Okay, so this is basically this same, oh, this is important to show. This is the disclaimer. There's a big legal disclaimer that basically these numbers change. I'm pretty sure this disclaimer was not here a couple of weeks ago. There was some language like this, but not a pop-up that comes up on the flu view as soon as you get there. You can't do very much here without scrolling through it, in principle reading it. And I would say it appeared because of tough questions they're getting about this website and the data on it, which is rather strange. Okay, so here we have the red is indicating we're at or above this threshold that they compute in their model. That's not the red line, but these black thingies here. This black model. You notice the model's not that accurate in the winter. Okay. And so one of the questions one might ask about the numbers I showed in the NCHS data file is how complete are they? They do change. And this, for example, let's go to the 12th week. This is up from what the 12th week was last week. So this data was put out on Friday, April 10th, 2020, and it's good through whatever good means, let's say, through week 13. On April 3rd, they put out a file, NCHS Data 13, which went up to week 12, and this number here, the total deaths, for example, was a bit lower. So it changes a lot in the last couple of weeks, which matches their verbal description and their small corrections that have occurred up here. By small, I mean like 10 or 5 or some number like that, typically not a very large correction. So the concept is they wait a bit, which is why this is a couple of weeks old, March 28th, to collect the death certificates. Most of the death certificate data, it implies and looks like, arrives in a week or two. And then you get a few deaths reports maybe trickling in a couple of months or even longer. You know, somebody died in their apartment or home and they weren't found for a month, or things like that happen. Bureaucratic delays, whatever. But basically, you expect it to be pretty up to date, going back before a couple of weeks. And note that in the COVID-19 deaths are not visible between 1 and week 11. So that's before the couple of weeks. So it seems like the data should be complete or nearly complete. And that's what this table here seems to say, right? Okay, so this is a table for the last 3 weeks, and it shows number of influenza deaths, pneumonia deaths, total deaths, and then it has this percent complete column, which you would think refers to how complete it is. And it has this, the number may change. It's basically like a legal, yeah, here we go. This number indicates the percentage of all deaths that are expected to be reported that have been received in the system by the date of the report. So it's gobbledygook. And I'll say a little bit more about what I think that means. Naively, you would think that these numbers would be how many they've received. It says 93.3% for week 13, and it uses this strange language of greater than 100%, greater than 100% for weeks 12 and 11. Considering that 100% means complete, it's kind of puzzling what this means. From other sources that I'm not going to go into in this video, this appears to be a model. This basically says we were expecting to receive 93.3% based on what happened in previous years. Again, it's not clear what they're doing here. So it really isn't complete in the sense of we're monitoring how well we're collecting the statistics this year during a crisis when there's a lot of chaos and panic and so forth. You could have a number like that where you're looking at what's coming in, but it's not clear they're doing that. So these numbers may be completely meaningless. But you would certainly think from these numbers that it is fully up to date up until a couple weeks ago. And it kind of sounds like from some things I've seen, they're hedging about that since people are probably asking questions about why you see nothing up until week 12, nothing to even hint of COVID-19. And in fact, all of them so far are substantially below last year's numbers, even though we supposedly have a deadly disease spreading through the country during the last few months. Okay, so this is this table on FluView that I refer to. This is the FluView website, and the use of the term FluView is kind of curious because these are pneumonia and influenza deaths, and most of them, the vast majority of them, are pneumonia. It's not clear they're caused by the flu, meaning the influenza virus. Okay, so let's go back here, and we've gone through FluView, and now let's look at, this is the kicker, this is the thing. So actually I should mention this, do this explicitly just to minimize any questions about what's happening here. So let's go back to 2017. So that's the last year that we have a final deaths report from the CDC. So this starts here, 172, and it ends at 223. So let's just create a sum here. And we'll do it this kind of sum, and we do I, and I believe we do 172 to 223, and let's see if I did it right. No, it didn't do it right. Let's take a look here. What did I do wrong? Oh, okay. I apologize for this being kind of a tedious process. There we go. All right, so I've summed all of these deaths for the weeks in 2017, and let's format it with a comma with a thousand separator to make it clearer. So here we are. In 2017, 188,000 people, 286, died from pneumonia and influenza. And of that, about 180,000 from this column died from pneumonia. So that sets the stage. According to the weekly pneumonia and influenza numbers, 188,000 people, actually a little bit more, died from pneumonia and influenza in 2017, with the vast majority, 180,000. I'm not going to do the sum for that here, but you can do it yourself. Huge number. And you may realize that's much larger than the flu deaths number that you often hear in the media. But let's get to the final kicker after setting the stage there. And we're going to click on this. So this is the final deaths report from 2017. So this is the latest year for which they put out a report. And this lists the leading causes of death in 2017. And it gives annual numbers. So here it is. And here's the leading causes of death. For example, one of the big things in the report 8 is influenza and pneumonia. So let's go down here to page 6. All right. Have to wait for it to load. Okay, that's all right. We're getting there. This is table B, number of deaths, percentage of deaths, blah, 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 blah. So what we really care about here is 8, influenza and pneumonia. You would think that would be the same thing as pneumonia and influenza and would be either the same number or very close to the number in the file that I showed you, which is 188,000 and something. But what do you see? 55,672. The number in the weekly pneumonia and influenza deaths file for the year 2017 is over 3 times this influenza and pneumonia number. Isn't that baffling, bizarre? In my post and presentation, I present what's probably seems like the probable reason for this, and that reason is basically that they are taking a significant fraction of those pneumonia deaths, and they are through a mathematical model and various arguments, claiming that the pneumonias are due to the influenza virus. Not all of the 188,000, but a fraction, maybe less than a third, and that's the widely reported number, and that makes influenza a leading cause of death, probably to promote the flu vaccine, that you go get the flu vaccine each year. That's the probable reason. But that's all theory. All we can say for sure is this number here, the 55,672, is less than a third of the sum of the numbers for 2017 from this NCHS data 14.csv file. So obviously that's very concerning. You would expect pneumonia and influenza here to be pretty much the same as influenza and pneumonia here, pneumonia and influenza, and they differ by over a factor of 3. What do you do with that? It doesn't give you a warm, fuzzy feeling, to put it mildly. So that's basically it. I wanted to go through what the website looked like and the analysis for sort of records purposes in case the website changes, which seems to me very likely as these kind of questions continue to be raised. Again, this video was produced and captured early in the morning on Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. I'm just to add my disclaimer that I'm not a medical doctor. This is not intended as medical or other professional advice. If you need, any kind of professional advice such as health, medicine, legal, financial that requires, a qualified person, a person who's legally licensed, all that sort of thing, then you should seek and talk to that person about anything related to your health, your family, any of those sorts of things. Also, respiratory illnesses can be quite serious, as these numbers show. Many people die from pneumonia every year, so don't take it lightly, especially with the coronavirus situation. And the final, I have 2 more sort of statements just to put in here. I think the first is the goal here is, of course, to save lives and make good decisions. And that's the reason for going through these numbers and trying to figure out what's going on. And finally, in my personal opinion, what we need to do is to do randomized population sampling with tests that can tell us who is infected, who was infected, and by randomly sampling the population, not just people who are, go to the emergency room, not just people who are referred by doctors and things like that, we can determine the actual mortality rate, lethality of the coronavirus. We also need to collect the false positive, false negative rates of the tests that are used, and we need to also determine from random population sampling and other experiments how the disease spreads and how quickly it spreads. That will give us the information we need to make good decisions and to take the right actions to hopefully restore the economy, scale back the shelter in place based on knowledge and data rather than speculation or fear or anger and that sort of thing. That's what I think we should do. So that concludes this archival video. If you like this video, please take a moment to click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. We welcome constructive feedback and comments. Mathematical software is developing products and services to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and improving results. If you want to support our work, you can subscribe on our Patreon page. This is the URL for our Patreon page. Scan the QR code in the lower right corner with your smartphone to get the Patreon link. Our Patreon link is also in the show notes below.